Okay guys, I hope you're doing well. This is going to be a review of the first few parts of plot. I know we went over plot in quarter one, but there were a few things that we still sometimes struggle with plot. So this is going to serve as a review to help you complete the assignment that I posted over Lord of the Flies, and also serve as a way for you to get some points in the grade book to help your quarter four grades. Alright, so for the first assignment in Lord of the Flies, which I have another video that's posted that explains that assignment. The very first assignment is asking you to explain the basic situation of the novel. So if you take a look here, this is the slideshow that I used whenever I was first teaching you guys plot to begin with. So if you remember, we had a plot outline and we started with the exposition right here, and we went into conflict, which is this right here on the parts of the plot outline. These are the things that we're going to focus on for today. Okay, so the basic situation is exactly what it sounds like, the basic situation. This is just the very beginning of a story, the very beginning, most basic important points or important background information that you need in order to be able to continue to view and understand the story. Okay, so the basic situation is the very beginning of the story, and it's made up of two things. It's made up of, first, the exposition, and two, the conflict. Okay, so the exposition would be background information needed to understand the story. You could also think of it as what came before. Sometimes the exposition will be something that already happened to try to explain a bit more on what's going on, or it might be additional information that maybe you didn't know before. Okay, so exposition is background information needed to understand the story or what came before. So background information that might be needed would be setting, characters. Sometimes there will be more, but for now, these are going to be the basic things that we focus on. So in the exposition, we will cover setting and characters. So setting would be time and place. Time can include time of day or time period. So that would be noon versus the 1950s. And don't forget that sometimes the setting can change in a novel as well. Okay? So, just a review, exposition is the basic background information we need to understand a story. It includes setting, which can be time and place, and it also includes characters. So the exposition will only include the most important characters when we're discussing them in class, but typically this will be the characters introduced in the beginning of the story. Okay? And so that's the basic overview of what exposition is. So examples of this would include setting. If we're saying To Kill a Mockingbird, right, we can review that. The setting would be, time would be the 1950s over the course of a few years, because the novel expands several years. Move this over a bit. So setting would be 1950s over the course of a few years. The story takes place in Macomb, Alabama. So that would be time and place. Characters. There are so many characters in this story, right? So for exposition, though, I'm just going to include the most important ones that are mentioned in chapter 1 in the novel. So that would be Scout, Jim, Atticus, and the Yules. I think I cannot remember how to spell the Yules. We'll Google search that real fast. Okay, so Ewell. Oh, I got it right. Good for me, right, guys? All right, so setting 1950s over the course of a few years, story takes place in Macomb, Alabama. So that includes time and place. The most important characters would be Scout, Jim, Atticus, and the Yules. And that's exposition. So we said the basic situation is what we're working with, and we just discussed the exposition, which is the first part of the basic situation. Now we'll move on to conflict. Okay, so the conflict is the driving problem of a novel. The problem or issue that creates, well, you could say distress in a story. For To Kill a Mockingbird, the very beginning conflict is Scout and Jim are trying to remember how Jim broke his arm. That's the very beginning conflict, the initial conflict. There can be many conflicts or many problems throughout the novel. That would be considered probably, rising action because it's additional problems that are forcing the story forward. But the very first conflict or the very initial problem is what we're looking at with conflict. So the very first conflict of To Kill a Mockingbird would be is Jim and Scout trying to remember how Jim broke his arm. Okay, and then that would be an example of conflict. And that's it. That's all you need to know for the very first assignment. We're just reviewing the beginning parts of plot. So I want you to take a look at the basic situation. The basic situation is made up of two things: the exposition and the conflict. This is the very background information that we need in order to begin a novel, to begin to understand. Exposition is background information, including setting and characters. And then the conflict is the initial problem that starts the story or begins to drive the story forward. And that's it. That's all you need to know for now about the basic situation.